Welcome back to the second part of 8.5. So we're going to do some more examples, and these are actually going to amp up a little bit more about how we're actually solving it, and to kind of show you a few more layers of how things work together. So in this particular case, again, the first thing you want to do is you want to isolate the square root. So you want to get the square root all by itself. So how would you do that? You can add 3 to both sides. Now I want you to go ahead and pause the video and solve this like we did in the previous videos. Just work through it about how we solved it by squaring. As you did that, hopefully the first thing you remember is that x plus 3 squared is x plus 3 times x plus 3. And also when I square a square root, I just get the number underneath it, so 2x plus 9. That's really nice. Okay, now we're going to multiply this out. So I have x plus 3 and x plus 3, and you can multiply it and you end up with x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 2x plus 9. Now again, we're just going to reset and move that to the top just so I have a clear screen. How would I finish solving this? Well, like on the previous examples, I need to have this equal 0 and then I can factor it. So if you didn't do that, pause the video and go through that process. If you did, just go ahead and keep going. So we can subtract 2x and subtract 9, and notice that makes the 9's go away, and I'm just with x squared plus 4x equals 0. How do you factor that? Remember, the first thing to look for is the greatest common factor. So you get x times x plus 4 equals 0. That's nice, because that just means I have x equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0. So x is 0 or x equals -4 are my two options. But again, you're not done. You need to check. So if you didn't check, I want you to pause the video and go ahead and check it now. All right, you should have hopefully checked it. And let's start with doing 0. Plug that in for all the x's, and we end up with underneath the square is square root of 9. Square root of 9 is 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. That's good. Now we do the same with -4. Plug it in, -4, and end up with square root of 1, which is just going to give me 1 minus 3. Uh-oh, that's a problem, which actually means that -4 is not a solution, just 0 is a solution, just 0. So x equals 0 is the only solution for this particular equation. All right, so now I want you to use all those techniques we've already done, and I want you to solve this radical equation. Go ahead and pause the video and work through it. Well, first thing you should have done is isolate the square root. So subtract 5 from both sides. Then, to get rid of the square root, remember we square both sides. So, and squaring just means I'm going to multiply this out. So I'm going to end up, notice, with 3x, and here's all my multiplication steps. But I have 3x minus 11 equals x squared minus 10x plus 25. Okay. Well, let's reset again at the top of the page. As a reminder, we want to set it equal to 0 so we can use the zero product rule. So if we add 11 and subtract 3, we get minus 3x plus 36. Well, you can factor that, and it factors into x minus 9 and x minus 4. Again, I'm showing the steps if you want to pause and look at all the steps. And you can double check, but that is how it factors. And so we set each one equal to 0 and solve, and I get two answers. X is 4 or x is 9. As a reminder, you are not done. You need to then check that by plugging each one in. So start with x equals 4. Plug that in, and 3 times 4 is 12. 12 minus 11 is 1. Square root of 1 is 1, so 5 plus 1 is, that's a problem. So 4 doesn't work. Try 9. All right, so I have 3 times 9, that's going to be 27. 27 minus 11 is 16. Square root of 16 is 4. Hey! So 9 does check out, but 4 does not. So again, always check your answers and check both of them. All right, final one, example is this. Now notice I have 2 square roots. So why don't you ask yourself, what could we possibly do? Because remember, we want to get rid of the square roots. And we've been doing that by squaring. But if I square right now, that actually means I'm going to have to multiply the 2 square roots together because it's going to get ugly. Well, the first thing we can do is we can actually isolate one of the square roots. So I picked this one to keep by itself. Notice, now that this is all by itself, if I square this side, what's going to happen to that square root? Hopefully you're saying it's going to go away, which is exactly what I want. So we're going to take it, square both sides. I want you to pause the video and go ahead and multiply that out. Well, the left-hand side just gives me 2x plus 5. The right-hand side, I'm going to rewrite it, and then I'm just going to multiply. So now I'm going to take my time to distribute. This goes back to 8.4, about multiplying. So we're going to multiply all the different terms together. And notice the last one, which is 2 times 2 is 4. And square root of 2x and square root of 2x is here. So it's 4x squared. So again, I have 2x. I can combine these middle terms into 4 square root of 2x. And this is actually 4 times 2x because the square root of 4 is 2 and square root of x squared is x. Again, we're going to be able to actually do some assumptions here, but we'll talk about that later. So now I multiply together. Okay, so I'm here. Now what? How would I finish solving this problem? Well, I have one square root. Could I just isolate that one square root and then square again? All right, go ahead and pause the video and isolate that one square root and square both sides. Welcome back. First off, as you continue subtracting, moving stuff over, I can take 8x, subtract it, and I get minus 6x. 5 minus 1 is 4. So now we take that, we square both sides, and notice I just took a moment and just rewrote everything. So this is just going to give me 36x squared, because a negative times a negative is a positive. And I have 4 and 4. Actually, that's going to turn out 4 times 6, and 4 times 4 is 16. So we get all these terms. Here, be careful, because I have 4 times 4, which is 16. And then I have this 2x, because the square root times itself is just that value. Here, I combine like terms. And then here, I multiply out and get 32x. Now, we can continue solving this by setting it equal to 0. So I subtract 32, which gets me all the way up to 80x. So when I subtract 32x, I get 80x. Now I want to factor this. Well, remember, the first thing we always look for is what's the greatest common factor. Hopefully you're saying I can pull a 4 out and I'm left with 9x squared minus 20x plus 4. Now remember, just at this point in time, the zero product rule means that 4 equals 0, or 9x squared minus 20x minus 4 equals 0. Obviously 4 can't be equal to 0, so I'm just over 9x squared minus 20x plus 4. So I'm just left with that part. So now I can factor this. Specifically, I can break up that middle into negative 18x and minus 2x. Factor by grouping, and you end up with 9x minus 2 and x minus 2. Set each one equal to 0 and answer, and we end up with 2 answers. X equals 2/9 and x equals 2. A reminder, you're not done. You have to check your answers. So if you didn't check, I want you to pause the video and go ahead and finish checking. All right. Hopefully you already did that now. So x equals 2, we're just going to check this one first. Plug that in. And I end up with 4 plus 5 under 1 square root, which is 9. And the square root of 4 is 2, so I get 3 minus 4. That's a problem. Okay. So now we come over to this one. And I got 2/9. Okay. So as I work through this and I'm looking at it, I can multiply those out and I get 4/9. But now how am I going to add these two things together? Well, hopefully you're saying I have to make a common denominator. So if I multiply this by 9 over 9, I end up with 45 ninths. This thing, how do I take care of the square root of a fraction? Remember, it's the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. So on this side, I combine them together, and I get 49 ninths. And here I get minus 2 times 2 over 3, which is 49 over 9 minus 4 thirds equals 1, which is 7 thirds minus 4 thirds equals 1, or 3 thirds equals 1, which is true. So unfortunately, I went off the edge of my screen. You can't see it. But you look at these bottom things, even these lines right here and right here, and x equals 2 is not an answer. X equals 2 ninths is the only answer that works for this thing. So you can't make assumptions about positive or negative numbers or fractions or whole numbers. You really just have to check every single answer. Now, all these problems, notice they have lots of steps. They're not necessarily complex. Just take it methodically, one step at a time, and don't try to rush through or use some magic shortcut. I encourage you to just take your time and multiply everything out, and then you'll actually see how things work together. So good luck, and please let me know what questions you have.